The rhythm of the water against the hull is a language you have learned to understand without thinking, a steady, rhythmic thrumming that vibrates through the soles of your leather boots. It is the sound of the Bosporus, that restless stretch of sea that bridges two worlds, pushing and pulling against the massive limestone foundations of the sea walls. You lean your weight against the smooth, weathered timber of the Dromon's railing, feeling the slight sway of the ship as it sits moored in the harbour. Your back aches with a dull, familiar heat, the result of a long afternoon spent hauling heavy coils of hemp rope and checking the tension of the oars, but it is a quiet sort of pain that reminds you that you are alive and that you are exactly where you belong. The wood beneath your hands is slick with a fine mist of salt spray, and the air carries the sharp, bracing scent of the deep sea mixed with the more domestic smells of the city. The faint aroma of roasting lamb, the tang of vinegar, and the omnipresent, earthy perfume of wood smoke that clings to your wool cloak and settles in your hair. You are a small part of a vast and ancient machine, a single soul entrusted with the defense of the Queen of Cities. This ship, your Dromon, is a sleek and predator-like galley built for speed and endurance, its two banks of oars tucked away like the folded wings of a resting bird. It is a vessel of the Byzantine navy, a name that carries the weight of centuries, though you simply think of yourself as a Roman, a guardian of the traditions that have endured while the rest of the world shifted and fell. As you stand there, you can feel the immense presence of the city at your back, a sprawling labyrinth of stone and spirit that seems to breathe in time with the tide. The limestone of the sea walls, ancient and scarred by time, glows with a soft, pale radiance in the fading light, standing as a silent witness to the countless ships that have passed through these waters. The Golden Horn is beginning to settle into its evening mood, the busy commerce of the day giving way to a more contemplative stillness. The merchant cogs from the north and the fat-bellied grain ships from the south are bobbing quietly at their anchors, their crews settling down for their evening meals. You watch a small fishing boat glide past, the low splash of its oars the only sound in the deepening gloom. It is in these moments, as you prepare for the night ahead, that you might find yourself settling into a state of deep relaxation, letting the history of this place wash over you like the tide. If you are finding comfort in this journey through time and are settling in for the night, you are exactly where you need to be. Here at the Slumber Archives, we bring you new history narrations every single day to help you find rest, so if you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing so you never miss a night's journey. A simple like also helps other weary travelers find their way to us. Now, let us return to the twilight on the water. The sun has finally dipped below the horizon, and the sky is a bruised tapestry of violet and deep indigo. But the great dome of the Hagia Sophia still catches the very last of the light. It rises above the city like a second moon, its golden mosaics catching the dying rays and reflecting them back in a soft ethereal shimmer. From your position on the deck, it looks as though the church is floating, unmoored from the earth, a beacon of divine protection for all who dwell within the walls. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, the heavy wool providing a comforting barrier against the rising damp of the evening. The temperature is dropping, and the breeze that rolls off the Black Sea is turning brisk, carrying with it the promise of a cold night on watch. You move slowly across the deck, your movements practiced and sure even in the dim light. You know every inch of this ship, the way the deck planks groan in a specific spot near the mast, the sticky texture of the pitch used to seal the seams, and the heavy metallic smell of the bronze-shod ram at the prow. Your eyes wander to the covered apparatus near the bow, the secret heart of the Dromon that makes your enemies tremble. You do not touch it, not yet, but you feel its presence like a sleeping beast. It is the Siphon, the delivery system for the liquid fire that has turned back countless armadas. To be a crewman on a fire ship is to live with a constant, quiet tension, a knowledge that you carry the power of the sun within a wooden hull. But tonight, that tension is buried deep beneath the surface of your weariness. The city behind you is beginning to twinkle with 1,000 small lights as oil lamps are lit in the villas and the humble tenements alike. You can hear the distant, muffled sound of a bell ringing for evening prayers, the notes drifting over the water and losing their sharpness by the time they reach your ears. It is a peaceful sound, a reminder of the order and the rhythm that govern life in Constantinople. As the darkness deepens, the boundaries between the sky and the sea begin to blur, until it feels as though the ship is suspended in a vast, star-flecked void. The only constant is the lap of the water against the stone, a sound that has remained unchanged since the days of the first emperors. You find a spot near the stern where you can sit for a moment, resting your weight against a stack of spare oars. The wood is cool and solid, and you let your head rest back, looking up at the first stars as they pierce through the indigo veil. Your mind wanders to the marketplace you walked through earlier today, the vibrant colours of the silks and the sharp, pungent smell of the spice stalls still lingering in your memory. You think of the taste of the fresh bread you bought from a street vendor, warm and crusty, and the way the golden olive oil coated your tongue. These are the small, tangible things that make the city worth guarding, the simple pleasures of a life lived in the shadow of greatness. As the years have passed, you have learned to find beauty in the routine of your service. There is a meditative quality to the cleaning of the brass fittings, the rhythmic scrubbing of the decks, and the slow, careful inspection of the rigging. Each task is a prayer of sorts, a way of honouring the ship that keeps you safe and the city that feeds you. The ache in your back begins to subside, replaced by a heavy, pleasant lethargy that spreads through your limbs. The rocking of the Dromon is like a giant's cradle, lulling you into a state of quiet observation. You are not just a sailor, you are a part of the landscape, as much a fixture of the Golden Horn as the gulls that circle the harbour or the dolphins that sometimes play in the wake of the ships. The air is now thick with the scent of the sea, a briny, ancient smell that speaks of distant shores and forgotten shipwrecks. You breathe it in deeply, feeling it fill your lungs and clear your head. In the distance, you can see the flickering torches of the guards patrolling the battlements of the Theodosian walls, their light reflecting in the dark water like fallen stars. They are your brothers in arms, watching over the land while you watch over the sea, a dual shield that has held firm for centuries. The silence of the night is not a true silence, but a symphony of small noises, the creak of a rope, the flutter of a sail in the wind, the distant bark of a dog in the city streets. You close your eyes for a moment, allowing the sensory details of the twilight to wash over you. The cold stone of the sea walls, the weight of your wool cloak, the lingering scent of wood smoke. All of it anchors you to this moment in time. You are a Byzantine fireship crewman, a protector of the realm, and as the Golden Horn fades into the deep shadows of night, you are ready to stand your watch. The city sleeps, the emperor rests in his palace, and the Hagia Sophia stands guard over all. But here on the water, the pulse of the empire continues to beat, steady and strong, in the quiet heart of the Dromon. The weight of your secret is a physical thing, a subtle pressure against your chest that feels even heavier than the bronze-scaled cuirass you wear during the heat of battle. You are a Siphonarios, a title spoken with a mixture of reverence and suspicion in the taverns of the Contoskalion harbour. To the common sailor, you are a sorcerer of the waves. To the emperor, you are a living lock on the most precious gate of the empire. Your hands, calloused and stained with the faint, persistent scent of bitumen and sulphur, are among the few permitted to touch the bronze apparatus at the Dromon's prow. It is a strange, cold geometry of pipes and swivels, a mechanical serpent that waits for your command to breathe. But before you were ever taught the tilt of the nozzle or the rhythm of the bellows, you were brought before the icons in the silver-lit hush of a palace chapel. There, with the smell of expensive frankincense thick in your lungs, you placed your hand upon the holy Gospels and swore an oath of silence that carries the weight of your very soul. To speak of the mixture, the proportions of naphtha, the resin, the quicklime that makes the water itself scream in agony, is to invite a death that is both swift in this world and eternal in the next. You live your life in the long, cooling shadow of the great palace, housed in quarters that are comfortable but closely watched, while the soldiers of the thematic land armies might return to their farms in Anatolia or Thrace, boasting of their exploits to their neighbours and showing off scars earned in the mountain passes. You move through the city like a ghost in the machinery of state. Your world is bounded by the massive sea walls and the high, silent stone of the naval arsenal. There is a strange isolation in your status. You are paid in high-quality gold solidi, more than a common infantryman could dream of seeing in a decade of campaigning, yet you cannot truly share the source of your prosperity with those outside your small circle of shipmates. You sit in the wine shops near the port of Julian, listening to the merchants argue over the price of silk or the quality of Egyptian grain, and you remain a silent observer, a man who knows exactly how fragile this entire tapestry of commerce really is. If you fail, if the secret of the liquid fire is lost or stolen, the horizon would soon be crowded with the black sails of those who wish to see the Hagia Sophia's dome cast into the sea. As you walk the narrow, winding streets that lead from the harbour up toward the hippodrome, you feel the distinct social friction of your position. You are not a nobleman, yet you carry a secret that protects the throne of the Caesars. The land-based tagmata, the elite guards who parade in gilded armour through the Maese, often look down upon the sailors of the fleet as grimy labourers of the salt and soot. They see the mud on your boots and the stains on your tunic, failing to realize that while they are the shield of the city, you are its dragon. You let their arrogance slide past you, like the tide against the hull. There is a quiet pride in the way you carry yourself, a slow, measured gait that comes from years of balancing on a pitching deck. You know that when the bells of the city begin to toll in alarm, and the great chain is pulled tight across the mouth of the Golden Horn, it is not the spear-pitting infantry the city turns its eyes toward, but the low, sleek shapes of the Dromons slipping out into the mist. The air in your quarters is always slightly cooler than the humid streets outside, thick with the smell of old parchment and the oil lamps that burn late into the night. You spend hours studying the diagrams of the siphon, memorizing the tension of the leather valves and the exact angle required to catch the wind, so the fire does not blow back upon your own wooden deck. It is a meditative, lonely science. Your back aches from the constant crouching and the heavy lifting of the pressurized tanks, a dull throb that reminds you of the physical cost of guarding a miracle. You find yourself tracing the scars on your forearms, small white marks where droplets of the mixture once spat back at you during a training exercise. They are your only medals, hidden beneath your sleeves, visible only to yourself and the few men who stand beside you in the smoke. As the evening deepens, you might find yourself standing on a stone terrace overlooking the naval docks, watching the lanterns of the patrol boats bobbing like fallen stars on the dark water. The naval arsenal is a city within a city, a place of constant, muffled industry, where the rhythmic strike of the shipwright's hammer echoes the heartbeat of the empire. Here the Dromons are berthed and repaired, their hulls coated in thick pitch to protect them from the boring worms of the Marmara. You feel a deep, soul-deep connection to these vessels. They are not merely wood and sail. They are the vessels of a holy fire, and you are the priest of its terrible liturgy. There is a contemplative peace in this realization, a slow settling of the spirit as the city's noise begins to dim. You are part of an unbroken chain of guardians stretching back to the days of Kallinikos, the master builder who first brought the secret of the fire from Syria to the emperor's feet. Every time you check the seals on the bronze tanks or inspect the wick of the pilot light, you are performing a ritual that has saved Constantinople from the brink of ruin time and time again. The social distance, the secrecy, the isolation, it all pales in comparison to the moment when the order is given to unstop the siphon. In that instant, all the quiet hours of study and the lonely walks through the arsenal converge into a single blinding purpose. You adjust the wool of your cloak, pulling it tighter against the damp sea breeze that carries the scent of salt and distant pine. The ache in your joints is a familiar companion, a reminder of the years spent in service to a power that most men can only imagine in their nightmares. You think of the emperor in his silken chambers, and the monks in their stone cells, and the bakers preparing the morning's bread, all of them existing within a peace that you maintain with your silence and your steady hand. The life of a Siphonarios is one of shadows and fire, a delicate balance between the mundane world of the docks and the terrifying power of the liquid sun. And as you turn back toward the warmth of your hearth, the flickering light of the hearth fire seems to dance in your eyes, a reflection of the secret you carry, burning bright and silent in the heart of the night. The scent of old parchment and bitter resins always seems to cling to your skin, even after a long soak in the public baths. It is a smell that transcends the simple odours of the harbour, the salt, the rotting fish, the damp wood, and instead connects you to a lineage of men who turned the very elements into a shield for the empire. You often think of him, the man whose name is whispered in the corridors of the palace like a prayer or a curse. Kallinikos. He did not come from these lands of marble and gold, but from the searing heat of Heliopolis in Syria, carrying with him a secret that would change the fate of the world. You imagine him, as he must have been, fleeing the advancing shadows of the Umayyad conquest, his robes stained with the dust of the road and his mind heavy with a formula that could turn the tide of history. He arrived at the gates of Constantinople not as a beggar, but as a saviour, offering the emperor a gift that was born of both science and desperation. As you walk through the narrow, winding streets toward the great palace, your boots clicking rhythmically against the cool, dark basalt paving stones, you feel the weight of that legacy in your own hands. You are a small part of a vast, invisible machine, a chain of custody that stretches back over a century. The liquid you handle with such practiced care, the substance the common folk call sea fire or liquid fire, is more than just a weapon. It is a miracle of alchemy, a defiance of the natural order. You have seen it in practice during the drills, and you know its terrifying beauty. Unlike a common bonfire, which can be smothered by the sea, this fire thrives upon the waves. It spreads across the surface of the water like a living thing, a carpet of emerald and gold that devours everything it touches. To see it is to witness a violation of the senses, a fire that drinks the ocean and grows stronger for it. It does not merely burn, it hisses and roars with a voice like 1,000 angry hornets, a sound that lingers in your dreams long after the sun has set. The mystery of its creation is a burden you carry with a quiet, sombre pride. Within the inner sanctums of the city, far from the prying eyes of foreign merchants and curious spies, the manufacturing process is guarded with a ferocity that rivals the defense of the walls themselves. You have heard rumors of the Magirea, the secret laboratories where the ingredients are combined in great copper vats. The air in those places is said to be thick with the fumes of sulphur and naphtha, a mixture so potent it makes the eyes water and the throat constrict. Only a select few, those bound by blood and oath to the emperor, are permitted to oversee the final blending. You are not one of the alchemists, but as a Siphonarios, you are the final link in the chain, the one who must direct this volatile spirit against the enemies of the cross. You understand the physical reality of it, the way the mixture feels thick and viscous, like heavy oil, and how it must be kept under constant pressure within the bronze tanks of your ship. The state ensures that no single person knows the entire process. The men who mine the resins do not know the proportions of the salts. The sailors who operate the bellows do not know the source of the dark, pungent oils. It is a compartmentalized secret, a puzzle whose pieces are scattered across the bureaucracy of the city, held together only by the will of the Basileus. This secrecy is the true wall of Constantinople, a barrier made of silence that no battering ram can breach. You sometimes wonder if Callinicos himself felt this same sense of isolation, knowing that he had unleashed a power that could never be called back. As you pass by the shadows of the monumental columns, their intricate carvings blurred by the twilight, you feel the coldness of the stone and contrast it with the memory of the heat. The liquid fire is a hungry god, and you are its priest, tending to its needs with a steady hand and a cautious heart. There is a meditative quality to your work, a slow and deliberate pace that calms the nerves even as it sharpens the mind. When you are on the deck of the Dromon, checking the seals on the Siphon, you move with the grace of a man performing a sacred rite. You check the leather hoses for any sign of wear, running your fingers over the smooth, treated hide, feeling for the slightest imperfection. You inspect the bronze nozzle, the lion's head that will soon spit death, ensuring that the gears of the swivel are well greased and silent. Every movement is a prayer for safety, a silent plea that the fire will go outward and not inward. You have seen what happens when a tank ruptures, how the deck becomes a lake of unquenchable flame, and how the men become torches in an instant. It is a heavy knowledge, but it does not make your hand shake. Instead, it grounds you. It makes the simple acts of life, eating a piece of salted fish, drinking a cup of watered wine, feeling the wind on your face, seem all the more precious. The night air is growing cooler now, and as you reach the outskirts of the military quarter, the sounds of the city begin to soften. The distant ringing of a blacksmith's hammer, the muffled voices of guards changing watch, the gentle lapping of the sea against the piers. It all blends into a low, soothing hum. You think of the alchemists in their hidden workshops, their faces illuminated by the glow of the furnaces, working through the night to ensure the city's survival. They are the ghosts of Callinicos, continuing a tradition of fire that has kept the wolves from the door for generations. And as you prepare to return to your ship for the midnight watch, you feel a deep sense of belonging. You are a guardian of the flame, a keeper of the secret, and in the quiet of the night you find a strange kind of peace. The world may be full of chaos and war, but here, within the embrace of the great walls and the power of the liquid fire, there is a certainty that transcends the passage of time. You remember the first time you were shown the Siphon, how the older crewman spoke of it in hushed tones, as if the machine itself had ears. They told you that the fire was a gift from the heavens, a celestial light granted to the Romans to preserve the true faith. Whether it is divine or merely the result of clever chemistry, the effect remains the same. It is the ultimate deterrent, the reason why the great armadas of the Caliphate have broken like waves against the rocks of the Golden Horn. As you walk, you find yourself tracing the patterns of the stars above, wondering if they, too, are made of the same burning essence that sits in the dark holds of your fleet. The universe seems vast and indifferent, yet your role in it feels essential, a single man standing between the darkness and the light. The transition from the laboratory to the battlefield is a journey of transformation. In the quiet of the city, the liquid fire is an abstraction, a collection of jars and ledgers and whispered formulas. But on the water, under the heat of the midday sun or the gloom of a moonless night, it becomes a visceral reality. You can feel its pressure building in the pipes, a restless energy that vibrates through the soles of your feet. It is a living thing, straining to be released. And when the order finally comes, when the bellows are pumped and the valves are opened, the transformation is complete. The secret of Kallinikos is no longer a secret. It is a roar of defiance that lights up the sky and turns the sea into a furnace. But for now, that moment is in the future. For now there is only the walk through the quiet streets, the smell of the resins on your skin, and the steady, rhythmic beating of your own heart as you move through the shadows of the empire you protect. The stones under your feet are old, worn smooth by the passage of countless feet over hundreds of years, and you find comfort in their permanence. Emperors rise and fall, boundaries shift and languages change, but the fire remains. It is the constant thread in the tapestry of your life. As you approach the harbour, the silhouette of your ship, the Ethos, rises out of the gloom, its masts like skeletal fingers reaching for the stars. You know every inch of its timber, every creak of its hull. It is your home, your fortress, and your responsibility. You step onto the gangplank, the wood groaning slightly under your weight, and you feel the familiar sway of the ship as it dances with the tide. The secret is safe, the city is safe, and you, the Siphonarios, are ready to stand your watch in the long, silent hours before the dawn. Your fingers graze the cool, burnished metal of the siphon, tracing the intricate scales etched into its bronze skin. It is more than a weapon. It is a masterpiece of imperial engineering, a silent guardian that waits at the prow of your Dromon. The air here near the bow is thick with the scent of salt and the faint, lingering tang of naphtha, a sharp chemical smell that clings to the fibres of your tunic and the pores of your skin. You feel the weight of the bronze tube, cold and unyielding against your palm, a stark contrast to the warmth of your own breath in the midnight air. This is the heart of the fireship, the mouth of the dragon that has kept the enemies of the empire at bay for generations. As you lean against the railing, the wood smooth from years of use, you think of the craftsmen in the great palace workshops who forged this machine. They work in secret, behind high walls, their hammers striking rhythmically against glowing metal to create the pressurized heart of the ship. You can almost feel the tension in the bellows system below the deck, a complex arrangement of leather and wood that requires the strength of several men to prime. It is a delicate balance of pressure and release. When the time comes, the liquid fire is forced through these bronze veins, heated by a small brazier at the nozzle until it screams like a living thing. You remember the vibration of the deck beneath your boots when the pressure builds, a low rhythmic thudding that feels like the heartbeat of the ship itself. The craftsmanship is not merely for the sake of destruction, but for your own survival. A single flaw in the casting, a loose seal in the pipes, or a crack in the leather bellows would mean the fire would not find the enemy, but would instead bloom like a lethal flower within your own hull. You check the seals once more, your thumb feeling for the slight ridge where the bronze sections meet. They are reinforced with layers of lead and wrapped in heavy, oil-soaked linen to ensure that the heat remains trapped within the metal. The heat is immense. When the siphon is active, the air around it shimmer and warps, turning the world into a blurred, golden haze. You have seen the way the bronze glows a dull, angry red after a long engagement, and you know the importance of the cooling cloths that your shipmates keep ready in buckets of seawater. There is a strange, quiet dignity in the way the siphon is shaped. At the very end of the tube, the bronze has been fashioned into the snarling head of a dragon, its eyes wide and its jaws agape. In the daylight, it is a work of art, but in the chaos of a naval boarding, under the flickering light of the moon or the terrifying glow of the fire itself, it becomes a psychological terror. You have watched from the prow as enemy ships approached, their rowers faltering as they caught sight of the bronze beast looming over the waves. It is as if the ancient legends of the world have been given physical form, a mechanical monster that breathes a flame that cannot be extinguished by water. The sight of that open moor, glinting with the reflection of the sea, is often enough to break the spirit of even the bravest sailor before a single drop of the liquid fire has been spilled. You adjust your wool cloak, pulling it tighter against the damp mist that begins to roll in from the Bosphorus. The weight of the fabric is a comfort, a shield against the biting chill of the night. Your mind wanders to the mechanics of the swivel, the heavy bronze pivot that allows you to aim the dragon's breath with the precision of an archer. It moves with a surprising smoothness, greased with animal fat, to ensure that even in the heat of battle you can sweep the flames across the enemy's deck in a single fluid arc. You practice the motion often, even when the siphon is cold and empty, feeling the way the weight shifts and the way your muscles must tension to hold the aim steady against the rolling of the sea. The ship sways, and you hear the muffled sound of the water slapping against the hull, a rhythmic percussion that lulls you into a state of deep contemplation. You are the Siphonarios, the one who directs the fire, but you are also a servant of the machine. You know its temperaments, the way the pressure gauge hums when it is ready, and the specific hiss the naphtha makes as it passes through the narrow throat of the bronze tube. It is a relationship born of necessity and tempered by the constant threat of the sea. Below the deck, the large copper tanks hold the secret mixture, a viscous fluid that feels heavy and thick like honey. You have helped load those tanks in the dead of night, moving with practiced silence under the watchful eyes of the Varangian guards, knowing that a single spark at the wrong moment would turn this ship into a funeral pyre. As the stars shift slowly above the masts, you think of the psychological weight you carry. To the world outside the walls of Constantinople, you are a wielder of dark magic, a man who commands the elements themselves. But here, with the salt spray on your face and the dull ache in your back from the long watch, you know. The truth is far more grounded in the sweat of the forge and the precision of the mathematician. The fire is not magic. It is the result of centuries of Roman ingenuity, a legacy of knowledge passed down from master to apprentice, hidden away in the archives of the city. Yet, as you look at the bronze dragon, its features softened by the shadows of the night, you cannot help but feel a sense of awe. It is a guardian of the faith, a protector of the people who sleep in the houses that climb the hills of the city behind you. The silence of the harbour is profound, broken only by the occasional cry of a night bird or the distant ring of a bell from one of the many monasteries. You find yourself tracing the lines of the siphon once more, your fingers finding the small decorative flourishes that the smiths added, a leaf pattern here, a geometric border there. Even in a machine of war, there is room for beauty, a reminder of the civilization you are sworn to protect. The bronze feels less like a weapon now and more like a companion, a silent partner in the long hours of your vigil. You think of the men who stand on the other ships in the harbour, each with their own siphon, each watching the horizon for the first sign of a sail that shouldn't be there. Together, you form a line of fire that no fleet has ever truly broken. The mist thickens, wrapping the Dromon in a soft white shroud that makes the world feel small and intimate. The masts disappear into the grey above, and the shore becomes a faint, flickering line of lights. In this isolation, the siphon seems to grow in stature, its presence filling the prow of the ship. You imagine the pressure building within its bronze chambers, the latent energy of the empire waiting for the moment it is called upon. It is a heavy responsibility to hold the power of the sun in a tube of metal, but it is a burden you bear with a quiet pride. You are the gatekeeper of the waters, the one who ensures that the golden city remains untarnished by the flames of its enemies. You shift your weight, feeling the familiar wood of the deck beneath your feet, and let out a slow, steady breath. The night is far from over, and the dawn is still a distant promise. But for now, there is only the rhythm of the waves, the scent of the sea, and the cold, reassuring touch of the bronze dragon. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the harbor wash over you, and you realize that in this stillness you are exactly where you are meant to be. The secret fire is safe, the mechanisms are ready, and the walls of Constantinople stand tall and proud, guarded by the silent sentinels of the fleet. The low, rhythmic thrum of wood against water begins to vibrate through the soles of your boots, a steady pulse that signals the end of your quiet vigil. The Dromon is no longer a silent shadow moored to the quay. It has become a living thing, a predator stirring in the grey light of the early morning. You feel the shift in the deck beneath you as the rowers find their cadence, their long oars dipping into the salt water with a synchronized splash that echoes against the harbour walls. This is the transition from the stillness of the port to the restless energy of the Propontis, the sea that cradles the southern shores of the city. As you stand by the siphon, your hand resting lightly on the cold bronze of the dragon's neck, you can feel the tension in the air, a collective focus that binds every man on this vessel together. The maneuvers today are not for combat, but for something far more difficult: the mastery of movement and fire as a single breathing entity. Out here, on the open expanse of the Sea of Marmara, the currents are deceptive, swirling with a hidden strength that can pull a ship off course in the blink of an eye. You watch the water, noting the way the pale green waves crest and break, feeling the spray catch the wind and dampen your woolen tunic. High above, on the raised platform of the stern, the Dromon stands like a statue carved from cedar. His eyes are fixed on the horizon, but his awareness covers every inch of the deck. He is the mind of the ship, and you are its sting. Every command he barks is a thread that pulls you and the rowers into a delicate dance, a choreography of survival and destruction. Coordination is everything. As the ship begins a sharp turn to the starboard side, you feel the lean of the hull, the way the weight of the men and the heavy copper tanks shifts against the center of gravity. You must brace your legs, your muscles aching slightly from the effort of maintaining your balance while keeping the siphon steady. The rowers on the right side of the ship backwater with a sudden violent spray, while those on the left pull with doubled intensity. It is a jarring, grinding motion that would toss an inexperienced man into the sea. But you have done this 1,000 times. You anticipate the surge, leaning into the curve, your eyes locked on the imaginary target bobbing in the waves. The siphon men beneath you are working in perfect harmony with the oarsmen. As the ship swings into position, they prime the bellows, the rhythmic huffing sound of the air through the leather valves matching the heavy breathing of the men at the benches. The secret fire is too precious to waste on long, continuous streams that might miss their mark in the tossing swells. Instead, you practice the spurting technique, a method that requires nerves of steel and a delicate touch on the bronze lever. You wait for the moment when the Dromon levels out, the brief second of stability between the crests of the waves. With a sharp, controlled motion, you release a burst of air and fluid. The dragon breathes. A short, violent arc of liquid gold leaps from the nozzle, igniting as it passes the braziers and striking the water with a hiss that sounds like 1,000 angry serpents. It is a terrifying sight, even in practice, to see the fire refuse to die against the waves, floating and burning with an unnatural hunger. You quickly cut the flow, conserving the remaining mixture, feeling the heat of the discharge linger on your face like the ghost of a summer noon. This economy of motion is what the Dromon demands. He watches the arc of the fire, his face unreadable, looking for any hesitation or any sign of waste. To him,
Every drop of the naphtha is worth a gallon of a man's blood, and he expects you to treat it with the same reverence. You wipe a smudge of soot from the bronze casing, your fingers tracing the intricate scales of the dragon. The heat from the internal furnace of the siphon seeps through your thick leather gloves, a reminder of the volatile power you hold in your hands. It is a heavy responsibility, one that weighs on your shoulders more than the armor you wear. You are not just a soldier, you are a guardian of a secret that keeps the empire alive, a secret that must be wielded with the precision of a surgeon's knife.
As the morning progresses, the drills become more intense. The ship weaves through the treacherous currents near the Prince's Islands, where the water churns and boils over hidden shoals. The Dromon pushes the rowers to their limits, testing their ability to hold the ship steady in the crosswinds while you practice aiming the siphon against the wind itself. It is a dangerous game. A sudden gust could blow the fire back onto your own wooden decks. You have to read the wind by the feel of it on your neck and the way the spray flies from the bow. You adjust the angle of the siphon, leading the target, calculating the drift of the flames in your head. There is no manual for this, no written instructions that can capture the intuition required to fire a liquid sun from a moving platform. It is a knowledge that lives in your bones, passed down through the quiet whispers of the elder crewman during the long nights in the barracks. The ache in your back deepens as the hours pass, a dull, familiar throb that speaks of the physical cost of this life. The wool of your cloak is heavy with salt and dampness, and the smell of the sea is now inextricably mixed with the sharp, oily scent of the combustible fluid. Yet there is a profound sense of satisfaction in the work. You watch the rowers, their backs bared to the sun, their skin glistening with sweat and brine, moving as one. You see the way the ship responds to the Dromon smallest gesture, a testament to the discipline that has been forged over months of grueling labor. In these moments, the vast complexities of the Byzantine court, the politics of the patriarchs, and the distant threats of the caliphate all fade away. There is only the ship, the fire, and the sea. As the Dromon finally turns back toward the Golden Horn, the sun climbing higher into the sky, the pace of the rowing slows to a steady, homeward beat. The intensity of the drill begins to ebb, replaced by a quiet, exhausted camaraderie. You begin the process of cleaning and securing the siphon, a ritual that is as important as the firing itself. Every valve must be checked, every drop of residue wiped away with oiled rags, ensuring that the bronze remains bright and the mechanisms remain fluid. You work slowly, methodically, letting the motion of the ship soothe your tired limbs. The city begins to rise out of the haze in the distance, its domes and spires catching the light, a shimmering vision of civilization protected by the very fire you carry. You think of the currents you navigated today, the way the water pooled at the hull, trying to drag you toward the rocks. It is a metaphor for the empire itself, surrounded by shifting tides and hidden dangers, held upright only by the strength of its walls and the vigilance of its defenders. You feel a quiet pride in being part of that defense, a single link in a chain that has held for centuries. The weight of the bronze dragon under your hand no longer feels like a burden, but like a companion. As the ship glides back into the calmer waters of the harbour, passing under the watchful gaze of the towers, you allow yourself a moment of rest. You lean against the railing, watching the wake of the ship disappear into the vast blue expanse of the Propontis, knowing that tomorrow you will return to the sea, ready to breathe fire once more in the name of the Emperor. The smell of salt air is no longer a comfort. It has become a warning. For weeks, the horizon has been shifting, growing darker not with clouds, but with the silhouettes of 1,000 masts. You stand upon the deck of your Dromon, the wood vibrating softly beneath your boots as the tide pulls at the hull, and you watch the Umayyad fleet draw closer. They come like a slow-moving forest across the Sea of Marmara, their sails bleached white by the relentless sun of the Levant, carrying with them the ambition of a caliphate that has already swallowed the deserts, the mountains, and the ancient cities of the East. Now they have come for the Queen of Cities. You feel the weight of the moment in the small of your back, a dull ache born from hours of standing guard. The Theodosian walls loom behind you, those massive triple-layered sentinels of stone and brick that have never known defeat. From your vantage point on the water, they look like the very edge of the world, their towers casting long, jagged shadows across the Golden Horn. You know that the soldiers atop those battlements are watching the same horizon you are, their hands gripping the smooth shafts of their spears, their eyes squinting against the glare of the water. But the walls, for all their strength, cannot reach out into the deep. That task falls to you, to your ship, and to the secret resting within the bronze siphon at the prow. As the year 674 deepens into a summer of stifling heat, the tension in the air becomes almost thick enough to taste. It carries the scent of bitumen, of vinegar, and of the heavy wool of your tunic, damp with sweat. The Saracen fleet does not rush. They are patient, confident in their numbers. They believe that Constantinople is a fruit ready to be plucked, a city that will eventually wither under the pressure of a total blockade. You watch them anchor in the distance, their campfires at night appearing like a second galaxy of stars fallen to the earth, twinkling mockingly across the dark waves. Then comes the morning, when the waiting ends. The order is given not with a shout, but with the rhythmic, low thrum of the drum beating below decks, calling the rowers to their benches. You feel the ship lurch forward, the oars biting into the water with a synchronized splash that echoes against the hulls of the other Dromons in your line. This is the first real trial of the fire. Until now, the Siphon has been a mystery, a whispered promise from the Emperor Constantine IV and the engineer Kallinikos. You have practiced the movements, the priming of the furnace, the turning of the crank, but you have never seen it used against a living wall of wood and men. The distance between the two fleets closes with agonizing slowness. You can see the faces of the Arab sailors now, men who have travelled from the warm waters of the Nile and the docks of Alexandria. They are shouting, their voices carrying over the water in a chaotic din of defiance. They raise their shields, a shimmering wall of bronze and iron, and their archers draw back their bows, the strings creaking in the sudden silence of the approach. A flight of arrows whistles through the air, sounding like a sudden gust of wind through dry leaves, and you crouch low behind the gunwale, the wood splintering near your shoulder. Your heart hammers a steady rhythm against your ribs, but your hands remain steady. You reach for the siphon, the bronze dragon head, cool and indifferent to the chaos. Underneath the deck, the bellows are working, forcing air into the pressurized tanks, and you can hear the faint, high-pitched hiss of the liquid gold waiting to be released. It is a temperamental beast, this mixture of naphtha and resins, and you treat it with the reverence one might show a sleeping lion. The commander gives the signal. You lean into the mechanism, your muscles straining as you aim the long tube toward the nearest Saracen galley. With a sharp jerk of the lever, the world seems to tear apart. A roar, deeper and more terrifying than any storm, erupts from the mouth of the siphon. A jet of liquid fire leaps across the narrow gap of water, a brilliant, blinding streak of orange and crimson that defies the very laws of nature. It does not go out when it touches the spray of the sea. Instead, it seems to feed upon the water, burning with a frantic hissing intensity as it strikes the wooden hull of the enemy ship. The effect is instantaneous and horrific. The cedar and pine of the Umayyad ship, dried by the summer sun and coated in pitch, catch fire as if they were made of parchment. The flames do not merely flicker, they explode upward, climbing the masts and devouring the sails in a matter of heartbeats. You watch as the men on the enemy deck scramble in a desperate, futile dance. Some jump into the sea, thinking the water will offer sanctuary, only to find the fire following them, floating upon the surface of the waves in a shimmering, lethal carpet of blue and gold. There is a strange, heavy silence that falls over your own ship as you witness the destruction. Even the rowers seem to pause, their oars hovering just above the surface. You have seen fires before, hearth fires, signal fires, the controlled flames of the forge, but this is something different. This is a hunger made manifest. The heat is so intense that it blisters the paint on your own prow, forcing you to squint and shield your face with a heavy leather sleeve. The air is filled with the smell of burning pitch and the sharp chemical tang of the secret mixture, a scent that will linger in your hair and clothes for days to come. As the first Saracen ship begins to groan, its spine snapping under the weight of the heat, you realize that the entire nature of the war has shifted. The confidence of the Umayyad fleet has vanished, replaced by a primal, shivering terror. They have never seen anything like this. They have fought the Romans on land and held their own, but they have no defense against a weapon that turns the very sea into a furnace. You watch as their line begins to waver and break, the ships turning frantically to escape the reach of the fireships. The sun begins to dip lower in the sky, casting a long golden light across the wreckage. The water is littered with charred timbers and the remnants of a once proud navy. You feel a profound exhaustion settling into your limbs, the kind of tiredness that goes deeper than the muscles, reaching into the marrow of your bones. Your hands are stained with soot, and your throat is raw from the fumes. But as you look back at the walls of Constantinople, you see the people cheering. The sound is distant, muffled by the wind and the waves, but it carries a sense of relief that matches your own. The siege will not end today, or tomorrow. It will drag on for years, a slow war of attrition and sudden violent encounters. But the first trial is over. You have stood before the greatest threat the Empire has ever faced, and you have held the line. As your ship turns back toward the safety of the harbour, the oars dipping rhythmically once more, you lean your forehead against the cool bronze of the Siphon. It is quiet now, its fury spent. But you know that as long as you are there to wake it, the city will remain. The fire is your burden, your secret, and your shield. And as the twilight deepens into a bruised purple over the Bosporus, you allow yourself the luxury of a long, slow breath, listening to the water lap against the hull, constant and cold beneath the fading heat of the day. The air does not just grow cold, it turns brittle, as if the very atmosphere of the city might shatter like glass if a bell were struck too sharply. You pull your heavy wool cloak tighter around your shoulders, the fabric stiff with the salt of the sea and the rime of a frost that has not lifted for weeks. This is the winter of 717, a season that the old men in the taverns will speak of for generations, long after the ice has melted and the bones of the fallen have turned to dust. Your breath blooms before you in thick white clouds, matching the steam that rises from the kettles in the galley, but there is little warmth to be found in the belly of the ship. The wood of the hull feels like a slab of frozen earth against your spine, and the dampness of the Bosporus seems to have migrated into your very joints, a slow, deep ache that reminds you of your mortality with every movement. Outside the safety of the Golden Horn, the world is a bleak expanse of grey water and white-capped waves. The great Arab fleet, hundreds upon hundreds of masts like a drowned forest, sits in a vast crescent, choking the life from the city. They have come to finish what they started in the summer, but the winter has proven to be a far more patient executioner than the sword. You can see them from the deck of your Dromon, shivering men huddled on the decks of their ships, their colourful silks replaced by rough furs, their spirits flagging as the snow begins to fall in heavy, silent flakes. But for you, the cold is not just a hardship, it is a tactical reality. The naphtha in the bronze tanks beneath your feet has thickened, becoming sluggish and temperamental in the freezing temperatures. To wake the fire now requires a steady hand and a heart that does not tremble, even when the wind howls through the rigging like a dying beast. The Emperor Leo, a man who carries the weight of the empire behind eyes that never seem to close, has ordered the great chain to be drawn tight across the mouth of the Golden Horn. You have walked past the massive forged links many times, each one as thick as a man's thigh, anchored to the Tower of Eugenius on one side and the walls of Galata on the other. It is a gargantuan barrier of iron, floating on wooden buoys, a physical manifestation of the city's resolve. Behind this chain, your fleet finds a measure of sanctuary, a calm pool of water where the enemy cannot reach you. You watch the chain rise and fall with the tide, a rusted, salt-crusted serpent that guards the throat of the harbour. As long as that iron holds, the heart of the empire continues to beat, however faintly. Life during the siege has become a study in the economy of motion. You move slowly to preserve the meagre heat of your body, your boots crunching over the thin layer of ice that coats the deck each morning. Food is a memory of better times. Now it is mostly hard biscuit, soaked in watered-down wine to make it edible, and the occasional salted fish that tastes of nothing but brine. And yet there is a strange, quiet camaraderie in the darkness of the lower decks. You sit with the other crewmen, the scent of wood smoke from the small braziers clinging to your hair, and you speak in low tones about the homes you left behind in the themes of Anatolia, or the sun-drenched hills of Greece. The fireship is your world, a floating fortress of wood and bronze, and you tend to it with the devotion of a monk tending an eternal flame. You polish the brass fittings of the siphon until they shine even in the dim light, and you check the leather hoses for any sign of cracking from the frost. Then comes the night when the signal is given. The Arab commanders, desperate to break the stalemate and find shelter from the unrelenting storms, move their heavy transport ships closer to the city walls, hoping to find a weakness in the defences. The order comes down the line, passed from mouth to mouth in a hushed urgency. The fireships are to sail. You feel the familiar surge of adrenaline, a heat that starts in your chest and radiates outward, momentarily banishing the chill of the night. The chain is lowered, slipping beneath the dark water with a muffled groan of iron on stone, and your Dromon glides out into the open sea. The oars move in a slow, rhythmic ghost walk, muffled with rags to silence the splash, as you creep toward the silhouettes of the enemy giants. The darkness is absolute, save for the faint, shimmering reflection of the stars on the black water. You stand at your station, your hand resting on the lever of the siphon. The cold air bites at your exposed skin, but you do not feel it anymore. Your focus is entirely on the distance between your bow and the towering wooden wall of the nearest transport ship. You wait for the command, the single word that will transform this frozen world into a furnace. And when it comes, it is not a shout, but a sharp, clear whistle. You heave the lever back, and the bellows groan as they force the pressurized liquid through the heated pipes. The roar of the Greek fire is more deafening in the silence of winter than it ever was in the heat of summer. A brilliant, terrifying arc of liquid gold tears through the night, a sun born of salt and sulphur that turns the falling snow into a mist of steam. It strikes the enemy hull with a sound like a physical blow, and instantly the wood is engulfed. The fire does not flicker or struggle against the wind. It clings, it hungers, and it spreads with a predatory intelligence. You watch as the flames leap from the water to the rigging, turning the Arab ship into a towering torch that illuminates the entire Bosporus. The heat is so intense that you have to shield your eyes, a sudden violent summer in the middle of a graveyard of ice. As the enemy fleet scatters in a blind panic, their ships colliding with one another in the desperate attempt to escape the liquid flame, you feel the Dromon bank sharply to port, turning back toward the safety of the Golden Horn. The blockade is broken, not by numbers or by steel, but by the sheer, unyielding power of the fire you carry. You look back over your shoulder and see the glow of the burning ships reflecting off the white walls of Constantinople, a halo of orange and red that makes the city look as though it were carved from embers. The great iron chain is raised once more, its links dripping with freezing slush as it settles back into its place of vigil. Returning to your berth, the silence of the harbour feels heavier than before. The adrenaline fades, leaving you spent and trembling as the cold rushes back in to reclaim your limbs. You descend into the hold, your boots heavy on the ladder, and find your way back to your pallet. Your hands are stained with the soot of the siphon, and your lungs burn slightly from the acrid fumes. But as you close your eyes, you feel the city breathing around you. The walls are still standing. The harbour is still yours. You pull your cloak over your head, blocking out the dim light of the lantern, and listen to the ice scraping softly against the hull, a reminder that the winter is long, but the fire is patient, and for tonight, that is enough. The days that follow are a blur of white and grey. You spend hours clearing the deck of snow, shoveling it overboard into the dark water, where it vanishes instantly. You watch the supply wagons roll across the frozen ground within the city, bringing what little grain remains to the granaries. There is a grim satisfaction in knowing that while you are cold, the enemy is freezing. While you are hungry, they are starving. The siege has turned into a test of wills, a slow-motion battle where the primary weapon is endurance. You find yourself watching the seagulls as they wheel above the harbour, their cries the only sound in the crystalline air, and you wonder if they recognize the change in the world below them. To them, the fire and the iron are merely obstacles in their search for a meal, but to you, they are the boundaries of your existence. As the winter begins its slow, agonizing retreat, the ice on the Golden Horn starts to crack with sounds like distant thunder. The chain remains, a constant presence, its surface now scarred by the winter's bite, but its strength undiminished. You know that the spring will bring new challenges, that the seas will once again be filled with the sails of those who wish to see the city fall. But as you stand on the deck of the fireship, watching the first pale light of a February morning touch the dome of the Hagia Sophia, you feel a sense of quiet triumph. You have survived the fire and the ice, and the city, like the bronze siphon you guard, remains cold, silent, and ready to roar once more. The dull, rhythmic scrape of a wooden spoon against a ceramic bowl is often the first sound to greet the morning, a humble melody that precedes the roar of the siphons. You sit on a low bench, the grain of the cypress wood pressing through your thin tunic as you stare into the greyish mush that fuels the defenders of the Roman world. This is the paximadion, the twice-baked hardtack that is as stubborn as the walls of the city themselves. You break a piece off with a sharp snap, feeling the vibration in your teeth, and drop it into a shallow cup of wine heavily diluted with water and sharpened with a splash of vinegar. The liquid is tart, catching in the back of your throat, but it serves a purpose beyond simple hydration. It cuts through the salt that seems to coat your entire existence, from the spray of the marmara to the preserved fish that makes up your midday meal. You watch the small flakes of dried mackerel soften in the vinegar wine, noting how the oil beads on the surface. It is a simple diet, one governed by the rhythms of the sea and the strictures of the church, yet there is a profound comfort in its consistency. As you chew the softened bread, you feel the slow warmth spreading through your chest, a quiet energy to replace the heat lost to the damp harbour air. The salt stings the small cuts on your hands, those tiny, inevitable nicks from handling rope and bronze, but you welcome the sensation. It reminds you that you are alive, that your body is a vessel being maintained for a higher purpose. You lean back against the cool stone of the warehouse wall, the scent of old wood and drying nets thick in the air, and for a moment the vast complexities of imperial politics vanish, replaced by the singular, grounding reality of a full belly and a moment of stillness. As the sun climbs higher, casting long golden fingers across the Golden Horn, the atmosphere on the docks begins to shift. The casual chatter of the morning meal fades, replaced by a solemn, expectant energy. You stand and brush the crumbs from your lap, straightening your heavy wool cloak as you see the procession approaching from the direction of the great palace. It is a sight that never fails to steady your heart. Leading the way is the patriarch himself, his vestments shimmering with threads of gold and silver that catch the light like the scales of a great fish. He is surrounded by priests carrying censers, the thick, sweet clouds of frankincense rolling over the water to mingle with the brine and the faint, chemical tang of the naphtha. You take your place among the crew, standing shoulder to shoulder, with men whose faces are as familiar to you as your own reflection. There is a shared silence here, a weight of responsibility that transcends the physical. As the patriarch raises his hand to begin the blessing of the fleet, you bow your head, feeling the cool mist of holy water as it is flicked from a bundle of hyssop. The droplets land on your brow and on the polished bronze of the siphon, and in that moment the machine ceases to be merely a weapon of war. It is consecrated. It is a holy instrument of the Empire's survival, a physical manifestation of divine protection. You listen to the low, melodic chanting of the Greek liturgy, the vowels stretching out over the water, and you feel a sense of profound belonging. You are not just a sailor or a soldier, you are a guardian of the Orthodox world, a steward of a fire that was granted to the emperors by the heavens themselves. This sense of the sacred permeates every aspect of your work with the Greek fire. Among the crew, there is a language of superstition and ritual that only those who serve the siphons truly understand. You never speak the full name of the mixture while on board, referring to it only as the liquid or the gift, as if naming it too boldly might invite its wrath. You have seen what it can do when it is unchained, how it dances upon the waves, refusing to be extinguished by the very element that should kill it. Because of this, you treat the copper tanks with a reverence usually reserved for the relics of saints. Before the ship casts off, you might surreptitiously touch a small icon of St. Nicholas tucked near the steering oar, or perhaps you ensure that the bronze nozzle is wiped clean with a specific silk cloth, a habit born of a dozen successful sorties. There is a deep camaraderie in this shared secrecy. You and your shipmates are bound by the knowledge of how to wake the dragon, a secret that the caliph's engineers would give a mountain of gold to possess. This bond is forged in the cramped spaces below deck, where you check the leather bellows for leaks and ensure the furnaces are primed with the finest charcoal. You move in a synchronized dance, needing no words to communicate the adjustment of a valve or the tension of a rope. When you look at the man beside you, you see more than a comrade. You see a keeper of the same dangerous light. You know the sound of his breathing in the dark, the way he braces himself against the roll of the ship, and the specific grim set of his jaw when the order is given to light the braziers. It is a brotherhood of the flame, a small, tight-knit community of survivors who live in the shadow of a power they can barely control. As the ceremony concludes and the priests depart, the harbour returns to its usual bustle, but the air feels different, thicker perhaps, or more purposeful. You return to your ship, your boots thumping softly on the gangplank. The smell of the incense lingers in your hair and clothes, a pleasant counterpoint to the ever-present scent of pine resin and bitumen. You spend the afternoon performing the small, meditative tasks that keep a ship healthy, You pick at a frayed bit of hemp, twisting it back into place, or you use a bit of oil to polish the hinges of the siphon's swivel mount. These are the quiet rituals of maintenance, the slow, steady actions that keep the mind from wandering toward the terrors of the coming campaign. The sun begins to dip lower, painting the sky in bruises of purple and deep orange, mirroring the colors of the imperial banners. You find yourself sitting on the prow, looking out toward the Bosporus where the currents churn and swirl. You think of the stories told by the older veterans, tales of the great sieges where the sea itself seemed to be made of gold and fury. They speak of the way the fire screams as it leaves the tube, a sound like 1,000 angry hawks. You wonder if you will hear that sound again soon. But for now, there is only the lap of the water against the hull and the distant cry of a gull. You reach into your tunic and pull out a small dried fig, a rare treat saved from the morning, and savor its concentrated sweetness. It is a tiny spark of pleasure in a life defined by duty and discipline. As twilight deepens into a true velvety dark, the city behind you begins to glow with 1,000 small lamps. From your vantage point on the water, Constantinople looks like a crown cast down upon the hills, its jewels sparkling in the night. You feel the cool wind pick up, carrying the scent of wood smoke and roasting meat from the markets of the Mese. It is a reminder of what you are protecting: the homes, the families, the ancient libraries, and the hallowed altars. Your belly is no longer empty, your spirit has been shored up by prayer, and your hands are steady. You wrap your cloak tighter around your shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of the wool, and prepare for your watch. The fireship sits low in the water, a silent predator in the dark, and you are its eyes and ears. The stars begin to emerge, piercing the canopy of the sky one by one. You find the North Star and fix your gaze upon it, using its constancy to anchor your thoughts. The life of a Siphon ship crewman is one of extremes, long stretches of mundane labor and simple rations, punctuated by moments of unimaginable intensity. But in this quiet hour, as the city sleeps and the fleet rests, you find a strange kind of peace. You are a small part of a vast, ancient machine, a single link in a chain that has held for centuries. And as the vinegar-sharp taste of the morning's wine lingers as a faint memory, you realize that you would trade this life for no other. The salt, the bread, the prayer, and the flame, they are the elements of your world, and they are enough. You settle into the rhythm of the night watch, the slow pulse of the sea beneath you, and wait for the dawn to bring whatever challenges it may. The smell of wet wool and seasoned timber surrounds you as you run your hand along the thick bulwark of the Dromon, feeling the grain of the wood beneath your calloused palm. This vessel is not the sleek, slender Byram of the ancient stories, those light-footed dancers of the Mediterranean that your ancestors once rode into the spray. No, the Dromon is a heavier beast, a creature born of necessity and the weight of empire. It is broader in the beam, sitting deeper in the water to support the immense burden of its purpose. You feel the slow, rhythmic thrum of the 2 banks of oars below your feet, 50 rowers on each side, their synchronized efforts pushing this massive wooden fortress through the swell with a steady, grinding determination. As you walk the length of the deck, you notice how the very architecture of the ship has shifted to accommodate the changing face of war. Where the old ships relied on speed and the bronze-tipped ram to pierce a hull, your Dromon is a floating platform for fire and steel. The sides are higher, built sturdily to repel boarders and to withstand the crashing impact of enemy projectiles. You look up at the towering masts, their lateen sails furled tight against the spars for the night, and you appreciate the sheer density of the construction. It is a ship that feels like a castle, a piece of the city's own walls that has broken free to roam the waves. The air grows slightly damp as a light mist begins to settle over the Golden Horn, and you see the deckhands moving with practiced efficiency to ensure the ship's most vital defences are ready. They are spreading heavy sheets of felt and thick ox hides across the exposed woodwork of the upper decks and the railings. You watch as they soak these coverings with buckets of sharp, pungent vinegar. The smell is acidic and biting, cutting through the salt air and the scent of cooking fires from the shore. This is your shield against the very weapon you wield. Should a stray spark or an enemy's incendiary pot find its way onto your deck, the vinegar-soaked hides will smother the flames before they can take hold of the pitch-sealed timber. It is a strange irony you often ponder, that the same liquid that preserves the olives in your ration bag is what keeps your wooden world from turning into a pyre. You step around a coil of heavy rope and look toward the center of the ship, where the wooden superstructure rises like a small fortress from the deck. This is the Xylocastron, the wooden castle, a high square tower built around the mainmast. From its elevated platform, the archers and marines can look down upon the decks of any enemy ship that dares to draw close. You can see the silhouettes of your brothers in arms up there, their bows leaning against the crenellated wood, their eyes scanning the dark water. The height gives them a lethal advantage, allowing them to rain down arrows and heavy stones while remaining protected behind the thick, hide-covered planks. It is a place of strength, a vantage point that turns the sea into a vertical battlefield where gravity itself becomes a weapon of the Empire. The weight of your own equipment feels familiar and grounding as you lean back against the base of the Xylocastron. The slow sway of the ship is a lullaby for the weary, a gentle rocking that belies the destructive power contained within these hulls. You think of the evolution of these ships, how each plank and every soaked hide represents centuries of hard-won wisdom. The Dromon did not appear overnight. It was carved out of the lessons of lost battles and the desperate need to hold the line against those who would see the Queen of Cities fall. Every structural difference, from the broader hull to the placement of the archer towers, is a testament to the resilience of your people. You watch a small lantern flicker in the distance, perhaps a fishing boat or a scout returning from the mouth of the Bosphorus. The light dances on the water, a tiny spark in the vast velvet darkness. It reminds you of the fire you carry in the bronze siphons at the prow, the secret flame that sleeps in its copper belly. But for now, the fire is quiet. The only sound is the soft lap of the waves against the hull and the occasional creak of the heavy timbers as they settle into the night. You feel a deep sense of security in the solidity of the Dromon, this heavy, vinegar-scented guardian that carries you through the dark. As the watch continues, your mind drifts to the men who built this ship, the shipwrights in the great dockyard who laboured over the selection of the oak and the cedar. They would have chosen each beam for its strength, knowing that it would eventually bear the weight of the Xylocastron and the heavy hides. You imagine the heat of the tar pits and the rhythmic sound of the hammers, a symphony of construction that echoes the heartbeat of the city itself. This ship is more than wood and rope. It is the collective will of Constantinople, rendered in timber and sail. The vinegar on the hides begins to dry slightly in the cool breeze, leaving a faint, crystalline residue that glimmers faintly in the starlight. You reach out and touch the damp felt, feeling its rough, heavy texture. It is cold and reassuring. In a world of fire and chaos, these simple materials, vinegar, hide, and wood, are the thin line between life and the abyss. You take a long, slow breath, letting the sharpness of the air clear your head. The night is long and the sea is patient, but you are well protected within the sturdy ribs of your Dromon, a soldier of the waves standing guard, while the rest of the world dreams of peace. You find a small stool near the mast and sit for a moment, resting your legs. The ache in your lower back, a constant companion from years of standing on a moving deck, softens as you shift your weight. You look up at the stars, which seem to move in a slow, circular dance around the masthead. The constellations are the same ones the ancient Greeks steered by, yet here you are, on a ship they would barely recognize, defending a world they could never have imagined. The Bireme is a ghost of the past, a memory of a time when the sea was a different kind of master. Your Dromon is the present, heavy, resilient, and unyielding. The silence of the deck is occasionally broken by the low murmur of the men in the xylocastron above you. Their voices are hushed, a private conversation shared between those who watch the horizon. You don't need to hear their words to know what they're talking about. Home, the price of grain in the markets, the families waiting for them, behind the great Theodosian walls. These are the threads that bind you all together, more tightly than any rope on this ship. You are a community of the sea, a small floating village bound by duty and the shared scent of vinegar and salt. As the hours crawl toward the early morning, the mist thickens slightly, blurring the lines between the sea and the sky. The Dromon feels like it is floating in a void, a solitary world of its own. You check the tension on the hides one last time, ensuring they are secure and haven't shifted in the night. Everything is as it should be. The wooden castle stands tall, the hides are damp and ready, and the hull beneath you is strong. You settle back into your rhythm, a silent sentry in the heart of the Roman world, watching the mist for the first pale light of the coming day. The smell of brine is often interrupted by the scent of cloves and coriander, a fragrant trail left by the heavy-bellied merchant cogs that you now shadow through the narrows. Your hands, calloused by the constant handling of wet ropes and the rough texture of the Siphon's bronze casing, find a moment of rest upon the railing. This is the duty of the Dromon, beyond the thrill of fire, the quiet, steady work of the escort. You watch the wake of a Venetian trader ahead of you, its sails swollen with the northern breeze, carrying the riches of the Black Sea toward the hungry markets of the Mediterranean. It is your presence, the low profile of your warship, and the silent threat of the hidden flame that ensures these riches reach their destination. You are a part of the Pax Byzantina, a peace maintained not by words, but by the rhythmic dip of your oars and the golden lions painted upon your prow. The sea today is a deep, bruised purple, the color of the emperor's robes, and it stretches out in a vast, undulating carpet that connects the ends of the known world. As you glide past the jagged coastlines of the Aegean, you feel the weight of the responsibility resting upon your shoulders, a physical sensation like the heavy wool of your tunic. Without the navy, the lifeblood of Constantinople would cease to flow. The silk from the Far East, the grain from the Egyptian fields, and the furs from the frozen north all depend on the safety of these shipping lanes. You watch a small fishing boat bobbing in the distance, its crew waving as your massive Dromon passes by, and you realize that to them you are more than just a soldier. You are the horizon's guardian, the shield that keeps the shadows at bay. Lately, however, the shadows have taken a new and terrifying shape. The talk among the crew during the evening meal of salted fish and hard bread has turned increasingly to the north, to the fierce men known as the Rus. You have heard the stories whispered in the dark corners of the lower deck, stories of swift, shallow-draft longships that move with the grace of predators. They come from the great rivers, the Dnieper and the Volga, rowing out of the mists with a speed that defies the heavy currents. Unlike the slow-moving merchant vessels you usually protect, these raiders are agile, capable of disappearing into the rocky inlets where a deep-hulled Dromon cannot follow. You find yourself checking the horizon more frequently now, your eyes scanning for the telltale flash of a square sail or the rhythmic glint of many oars moving in perfect, lethal unison. The Rus do not fight like the Saracens. There is a wildness to them, a ferocity that feels as cold as the lands they hail from. You imagine the chill of the spray as they crest the waves, their shields overlapping like the scales of a serpent. Yet even as the thought brings a slight shiver to your spine, you feel a sense of grim confidence. They may have speed, and they may have the bravery of men who do not fear death, but they do not have the fire. They have never seen the sea itself turn into a furnace. You run a thumb over the leather seal of the siphon, feeling the cool metal beneath, and you know that if they come, they will find the Roman navy waiting, as steady and unyielding as the walls of the city itself. As the afternoon light begins to soften, turning the spray into a mist of liquid gold, the Dromon maneuvers to stay between the merchant fleet and the open sea. The work is repetitive and slow, a slow-motion dance of positioning and vigilance. You feel the ache in your lower back from standing so long, a dull throb that reminds you of the many miles you have travelled since leaving the Golden Horn. To pass the time, you watch the gulls trailing in the ship's wake, their cries sharp and piercing against the low hum of the wind in the rigging. They are the only ones who can move between the worlds of land and sea with ease, while you remain tethered to this wooden world, a solitary speck of order in a chaotic expanse of blue. The Pax Byzantina is a fragile thing, held together by the strength of your arms and the sharpness of your eyes. You think of the silk markets in the city, where the air is thick with the smell of expensive dyes and the chatter of a dozen different languages. The people there walk in safety, unaware of the constant vigil kept by men like you on the fringes of the empire. They do not feel the spray on their faces or the salt stinging their eyes. They do not know the sound of the hull groaning against the pressure of the deep. And that is as it should be. Your role is to be the silent sentinel, the one who watches the borders, so that the heart of the world may continue to beat in peace. The sun sinks lower, casting long, thin shadows across the deck, and the temperature begins to drop. You pull your cloak tighter, the thick fabric offering a small comfort against the rising damp. The merchant ships are dropping anchor in a sheltered cove for the night, and your captain signals for the Dromon to take its station at the mouth of the bay. It will be a long night of watching the moonlit waves for any sign of a Russ's longship cutting through the dark. But as you settle into your spot near the bow, listening to the rhythmic lap of the water against the side, you feel a strange sense of contentment. The sea is a demanding master, but it is also a familiar one. In the silence of the twilight, with the stars beginning to flicker overhead like the distant campfires of an army, you are exactly where you are meant to be. You watch the last of the light fade from the peaks of the distant islands, leaving only the silhouettes of the mountains against a darkening sky. The transition from day to night is always the most dangerous time, when the eyes can play tricks and a whitecap can easily be mistaken for the wake of a raider. You breathe in deeply, the air sharp with salt and the faint, lingering smell of the pitch used to seal the deck. It is a lonely life, perhaps, but there is a dignity in it, a sense of being part of something far older and larger than yourself. As the first watch begins, you settle into the stillness, your senses tuned to the subtle shifts of the water, a guardian of the Silk Road, waiting for the dawn. The memory of a specific summer morning often drifts back to you as you sit by the flickering lamp. A morning in the year 941, when the air was heavy with an unnatural heat that had nothing to do with the season. You remember the weight of your leather tunic pressing against your chest as the news filtered through the docks. The Rus had come again. Thousands of their slender, shallow-draft boats had descended from the north, emerging from the mists of the Black Sea like a plague of locusts upon the water. They were led by Igor of Kiev, a man whose name carried the chill of the deep forests, and for a moment even the veteran sailors of the Golden Horn felt a flicker of doubt. The sheer number of their vessels seemed to blot out the waves, a wooden carpet stretching toward the horizon, threatening to choke the life from the city's throat. But you were not among those who trembled, for you knew the secret hidden beneath the copper silence of your Dromon. You remember the slow, rhythmic pull of the oars as your fleet moved out to meet them near the entrance of the Bosphorus, The sun caught the glint of their axes and the round, colourful shields lining their gunwales. They were confident, rowing with a ferocity that suggested they expected a simple boarding action, a clash of steel on steel, where their superior numbers would surely prevail. You stood at your station, your hand resting on the cold metal of the siphon, feeling the slight vibration of the ship's hull as the rowers found their pace. The scent of the city, incense, dust, and baked bread, was slowly replaced by the sharp metallic tang of the open sea. As the distance closed, the Rus began to swarm, their small boats darting like water striders toward your much larger, more cumbersome vessels. They intended to surround you, to climb your high sides and overwhelm you with sheer ferocity. You waited for the signal, your breath shallow and steady. When it finally came, it was not a shout, but a low, terrifying roar as the pressure was released. The liquid fire hissed through the air, arching over the water like a dragon's tongue. It did not merely burn, it seemed to possess a life of its own, clinging to the wooden hulls of the Rus's ships and spreading with a speed that defied logic. Even the water offered no sanctuary, for the flame danced upon the waves, turning the very sea into a furnace. Years later, you heard the stories told by the few who survived and returned to the north. They spoke of it not as a weapon of men, but as lightning sent from the heavens. They told their kinsmen that the Romans possessed the very fire of the clouds, and that it had fallen upon them to consume their fleet. You remember watching from the rail the heat so intense it singed your eyelashes as the proud navy of Igor was reduced to charred ribs and drifting ash. The screams of the invaders were swallowed by the crackle of the blaze and the crashing of the surf. It was a victory so absolute that it felt less like a battle and more like a folding of time, a moment where the ancient power of the empire reasserted its dominance over the world of the barbarians. The aftermath of such a cataclysm brings a strange, quiet reflection. In the weeks that followed, the shores were littered with the wreckage of the north, shattered oars, waterlogged furs, and the broken dreams of conquest. Yet the empire is a vast and hungry thing, and it has a way of absorbing its enemies once it has broken their spirit. As you walked through the markets of the maze in the months after the victory, you began to see them, the tall, fair-haired men of the north, no longer clutching axes in anger, but standing tall in the service of the emperor. The defeat of 941 had not merely pushed the Rus away, it had demonstrated a power so divine and terrifying that they sought to be near it, to share in its protection. You watched as these former raiders were integrated into the military fabric of Constantinople. They were men of immense strength and unwavering loyalty once their word was given, and the emperor was wise enough to utilize them. You would see them at the palace gates, their massive frames draped in heavy wool and silk, their eyes wide with the wonder of the great church and the golden halls. It is a peculiar thing to realize that the man you might have burned upon the waves a season ago is now the man standing guard over the city's treasures. This is the way of the world you inhabit, a constant cycle of destruction and assimilation, where the fire that destroys a fleet also clears the path for a new kind of peace. The integration of the Norsemen brought a new texture to your daily life. You began to hear their guttural tongues mingling with the Greek and Latin in the taverns near the harbour. You noticed the way they looked at the sea, not with the predatory hunger of the raider, but with a quiet respect for the empire that had mastered the very elements. Sometimes, during the long evening watches, you would share a flask of watered wine with a Varangian guard, a man whose skin was marked by the scars of old battles and the sun of the south. You could not speak his language, and he knew little of yours, but there was a shared understanding between you, a bond formed by the salt and the spray, and the knowledge of what it means to face the fire. The presence of these northerners added a layer of security to the city that felt as solid as the Theodosian walls themselves. They became the emperor's personal shadow, the axe-bearing barbarians who feared nothing but dishonor. To you, they were a reminder of the sheer reach of Constantinople, that a city could be so radiant and so powerful that it could turn its most bitter enemies into its most devoted protectors. As you adjusted the wick of your lamp, the light casting long shadows across the stone floor, you felt a sense of profound stability. The Rus had come with fire, and they had been met with a fire far greater. And in that heat, a new alliance had been forged, tempered like the steel of a well-made blade. As the years passed, the memory of the smoke over the Bosphorus faded into the general tapestry of your life, yet the lessons remained. You learned that the strength of the empire lay not just in its secret formulas or its massive walls, but in its ability to endure and to transform. The Northmen brought with them their stories of frozen forests and long winters, and in return, the empire gave them the warmth of the Mediterranean sun and the promise of a place in the greatest story ever told. You would see their children playing in the squares, their eyes already turning toward the sea, perhaps destined one day to serve on the very Dromons that had once laid waste to their grandfathers' ships. There is a comfort in this continuity, a slow rhythmic pulse like the tide against the quay. You feel it in the ache of your muscles after a long day of maintenance on the siphons and in the coolness of the evening air as it drifts through your window. The world outside may be chaotic, filled with shifting borders and rising kings, but here, under the protection of the Roman flame, there is a sense of permanence. You are a part of the fire that guards the night, a witness to the blending of cultures and the taming of the wild. As you finally lay down to rest, the distant sound of a Varangian's horn echoes softly through the streets, a low, mournful note that signals all is well, and you drift toward sleep, cradled by the history of a city that never truly forgets and never truly sleeps. The smell of wet wool and aging cedar hangs heavy in the air of the shipyard, a scent that has defined your life for as long as you can remember. But today, the air feels different. It carries a sharp, metallic edge, the kind that precedes a summer storm, though the sky remains a bruised and hollow grey. You lean your weight against a blackened timber, feeling the rough texture of the charred wood through your tunic, a reminder of the many times you have coaxed the liquid fire into its copper tubes. Your hands are stained with the soot of 1,000 practice runs, the dark lines etched into the creases of your palms like a map of the city's long defence. For centuries, the fire has been the heartbeat of Constantinople, a secret passed from father to son, a sacred trust that kept the world at bay. But as you look out over the Golden Horn, the water doesn't reflect the golden glow of a thriving empire. Instead, it ripples with the shadows of 100 masts, a forest of timber that has come not to trade but to claim. The internal rhythm of the city has grown frantic and discordant. You have felt it in the markets where the bread is scarce, and the talk is of emperors rising and falling like the tides. There is a weariness in your bones that no amount of sleep can touch, a heavy realization that the walls, though thick and ancient, can only hold back the tide of human ambition for so long. You adjust the heavy cloak around your shoulders, the fabric worn thin at the elbows, and begin the slow trek toward the harbour where your ship is moored. The streets are unusually quiet, the usual bustle replaced by a tense, waiting silence that makes the sound of your own footsteps on the cobblestones seem unnaturally loud. You pass a group of soldiers, their armour dull and unpolished, their eyes reflecting a fatigue that mirrors your own. The treasury is empty, they say. The gold has been stripped from the icons, and the silver melted down to pay for promises that were never meant to be kept. As you reach the docks, you see the Venetian galleys sitting low in the water, their hulls painted in vibrant colours that mock the grey despair of the city. They are massive, far taller than the swift Dromons you are used to piloting, their decks crowded with men in gleaming plate armour. You know your duty, You know the sequence of the valves and the exact moment to release the pressure, but as you look at those towering wooden walls, a cold knot forms in your stomach. The fire is a weapon of the open sea, a terrifying dragon that breathes death upon those who dare to approach. But here, trapped in the narrow waters of the Horn, the dragon feels caged and small. The order comes at last, not with a flourish of trumpets, but with a hushed command that ripples through the naval guild like a dying breath. You boarding your vessel, the familiar sway of the deck beneath your feet providing a fleeting moment of comfort. You check the siphons one last time, your fingers moving with a muscle memory that transcends the fear clouding your mind. The bronze glow of the tube is cold to the touch. You push off into the dark water, the oars dipping silently as you attempt to drift toward the enemy fleet under the cover of a moonless night. The plan is simple, to turn the very ships of the Crusaders into funeral pyres, to use the Greek fire to cleanse the harbour of those who would violate the Queen of Cities. But the wind is fickle, a shifting breeze that carries the scent of the sea and the stench of wood smoke from the outskirts. As you draw closer, the massive Venetian ships loom like mountains of oak. You signal for the fire to be lit, the familiar hiss of the bellows filling the small cabin, the heat beginning to radiate from the pressurized tanks. And then the world erupts in a blinding flash of orange and crimson. The fire leaps from the prow of your ship, a roaring torrent of liquid flame that dances across the surface of the water, seeking out the hulls of the invaders. For a moment, it seems as though the old magic will hold. The fire clings to everything it touches, refusing to be extinguished by the brine. But the Venetians have prepared. They have draped their ships in hides soaked in vinegar and thick, wet wool, and their sailors push back the flaming debris with long poles, their movements disciplined and cold. Your fire ship, so lethal on the high seas, finds no purchase against these floating fortresses. The massive galleys begin to close in, their sheer size dwarfing your craft, their archers raining down arrows that hiss as they vanish into the burning sea. You watch, helpless, as the fire you have guarded your entire life is brushed aside like a nuisance. The flame is fading, not because the secret is lost, but because the world has grown too large and too cynical for the ancient wonders of the Romans. The retreat is a blur of smoke and the sound of splintering wood. You scramble back to the safety of the sea walls, your lungs burning from the acrid fumes, your heart hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. From the ramparts, you watch the unthinkable happen. The Crusaders, the very men who swore to reclaim the Holy Lands, turn their ladders and their siege engines toward the walls of the Christian capital. The air is filled with the sound of iron striking stone and the screams of the dying. You stand among the remnants of the naval guild, men who have spent their lives on the water, now forced to defend the dry land with nothing but rusted swords and the desperation of the doomed. The city, which has stood for 900 years as a beacon of light, feels as though it is finally beginning to crumble. The instability of the court, the endless bickering of the nobles, and the empty promises of the emperors have left the gates vulnerable, and as the sun begins to rise on the 12th of April, 1204, you realize that the fire will not be enough to save you this time. The breach comes at the sea walls, where the Venetian ships have used their high masts to drop bridges directly onto the parapets. You are swept up in the chaos, the tide of fleeing citizens and retreating soldiers carrying you deeper into the heart of the city. The looting begins almost immediately, a systematic stripping of everything that made Constantinople beautiful. You hide in the shadows of a side street, watching as men in red crosses carry away the golden vessels from the altars of the Hagia Sophia. They tear down the bronze statues that have stood since the time of Constantine, melting them down for coin. The great library, the repository of 1,000 years of wisdom, is set to the torch. the charred pages of ancient scrolls drifting through the air like black snow. The tragedy is not just in the loss of gold or stone, but in the dispersal of the people, the breaking of the guilds and the scattering of the families who held the city together. You feel a profound sense of emptiness, a hollow ache in your chest as you realize that the life you knew is gone forever. The fire ships are destroyed or captured, their crews scattered to the winds, their secrets buried under the rubble of a fallen empire. As the days turn into weeks, the city becomes a ghost of its former self. The Latin conquerors walk the streets with a heavy, arrogant tread, while the Romans who remain move like shadows, their heads bowed and their spirits broken. You find yourself sitting by the edge of the Bosphorus, the cool water lapping at your feet, the same water that once carried you to glory. Your hands are no longer stained with soot, but they feel heavy and useless. You think of the fire, the way it used to roar in the tubes, the way it looked like a living thing as it raced across the waves. It was the soul of the city, a fierce and beautiful protector, and now it is extinguished. But as you sit there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, you realize that the fire isn't truly gone. It lives in your memory, and in the stories you will tell to those who will listen. The city may be occupied, its treasures stolen, and its walls broken, but the spirit of the fireship crewman remains, a quiet ember glowing in the dark. You pull your cloak tighter against the evening chill, the weight of the wool a small comfort in a world that has changed beyond recognition. The slow ache in your back reminds you of the labor you have endured, the history you have witnessed, and the resilience that is required to survive. You close your eyes, the sound of the water a gentle lullaby, and for a moment you are back on the deck of your Dromon, the wind in your hair and the fire at your command. The flame may be fading, but in the silence of the night it still burns bright enough to lead you towards sleep, a rest that is well earned, a peace that even the fall of empires cannot take away. The history of the city is now etched into your very soul, a story of fire and stone, of glory and loss, and as you drift further into the embrace of sleep, you carry that light with you, a guardian of the memory, waiting for the day when the flame might be kindled once more. The rhythmic slap of the golden horn against the hull of your Dromon has changed its tune over these long, weary weeks of 1453. It is no longer the proud, rhythmic pulse of a Mediterranean empire, but a frantic, hollow tapping, like a heartbeat, fluttering in a fever. You stand on the familiar deck, the wood smoothed by decades of your own movement, feeling the grit of ash and pulverized stone beneath your boots. The air over Constantinople is thick, a heavy blanket of smoke from the Sultan's cannons that never truly clears, smelling of sulphur, scorched earth, and the salt of the sea that has always been your lifeblood. Your wool cloak is heavy on your shoulders, damp with the morning mist and the spray of the waves, and your back aches with a dull, persistent throb that has become your constant companion since the siege began. You look out toward the horizon, where the Ottoman masts form a forest of cedar and pine, encircling the city like the jaws of a great beast. Your task is simple in its definition, yet monumental in its weight. You must keep the sea lanes open. You must reach the galleys carrying grain and hope from the west and shepherd them past the blockade to the crumbling piers of the city. As you grip the railing, your fingers trace the deep gouges in the timber, scars from previous skirmishes where the fire tubes roared and the sea turned to a garden of flame. You are one of the few left who truly understands the old ways of the water, the ancient secrets of the Roman navy that have been passed down through generations of sailors like you. The morning light is grey and filtered through the haze as you signal for the oars to dip. The movement is slow, deliberate, a measured pace that conserves the strength of the men below, whose breath you can hear rising through the hatches in ragged, rhythmic sighs. You feel the ship lurch forward, a slow awakening of the great wooden bird, and for a moment the weight in your chest lightens. On the water, you are not a trapped man in a dying city. You are a master of the currents, a guardian of the deep. You watch the 4 large Christian transports approaching from the south, their sails billowing with a favorable wind, and you know that the Sultan's fleet is already moving to intercept them. There is a strange, quiet dignity in the way your Dromon cuts through the swells, even as the massive Ottoman galleys bear down with their superior numbers. You adjust the heavy leather strap of your helmet, feeling the cool metal against your temples, and move toward the Siphon at the prow. The bronze lion's head is cold to the touch, its mouth open in a silent, eternal roar, waiting for the spark that will bring it to life. You remember the stories your grandfather told you of the great victories at sea, of times when the fire ships of the Romans cleared the waters of any who dared challenge the emperor. Now those stories feel like echoes from a dream, yet the heat of the liquid fire waiting in its pressurized tanks is very real, a simmering power that demands your absolute focus. As the distance between the fleets closes, the sound of the world narrows to the whistling of the wind in the rigging and the distant, rhythmic thumping of drums from the enemy ships. You see the Sultan himself on the shore, a tiny figure on a white horse at the water's edge, watching the struggle. You do not feel fear, not exactly. It is more a profound sense of duty, a realization that the entire history of your people is being distilled into this single afternoon on the waves. The Christian galleys are surrounded now, their high hulls towering over the lower Ottoman vessels, and you command your oarsmen to give everything they have. The ship surges, the bow splashing through the whitecaps, and you feel the vibration of the hull in your very bones. The clash, when it comes, is a cacophony of splintering wood and the shouts of men, but you remain focused on the pressure of the pump and the alignment of the siphon. You wait for the perfect moment, when the wind is just right and the enemy hull is close enough to feel the heat of their breath. When you finally release the valve, the roar of the Greek fire is like a living thing, a golden red tongue that licks out across the water, defying the very nature of the sea. The liquid clings to the enemy's oars and their sails, turning the blue water into a churning cauldron of light. For a few hours, the sea belongs to you again. The heavy transports are guided through the chaos, their hulls scraping against yours in a rough embrace as you lead them toward the safety of the chain across the Golden Horn. But as the sun begins to dip low, casting long bruised shadows over the domes of the city, the victory feels hollow. You watch the 4 ships pass behind the great iron chain, their holds full of supplies that might feed the city for another few weeks, but you look back at the horizon and see that the Sultan's fleet is still there, endless and unmoved. Your Dromon is battered, its paint scorched and its rigging frayed, and as you finally step off the deck onto the stone quay, your legs feel heavy, as if the very gravity of the earth has increased. You walk slowly through the streets of the Farnar district, the smell of wood smoke in your hair and the salt crusting on your skin, listening to the bells of the churches calling for a vespers that sounds more like a lament. You find a quiet corner near the sea wall, where the stones are old and covered in lichen, and you sit for a moment, letting the exhaustion wash over you. The city is quiet tonight, a silence born not of peace but of bated breath. You think of the centuries of sailors who sat where you are sitting, men who guarded these same walls and watched these same stars. You are the last of them, the final link in a chain that stretches back to the days of the Caesars. The fireship is your legacy, a weapon of light in a world that is slowly growing dark. You close your eyes, and the image of the flames dancing on the water remains burned into your eyelids, a flickering ghost of a glory that is fading into the mist of time. The night air is cool, pulling the heat from your tired muscles, and you wrap your cloak tighter around your chest. You can hear the distant murmur of the Ottoman camp outside the land walls, a low hum like a hive of bees, reminding you that the end is not a matter of if, but when. Yet as you drift toward a shallow sleep, leaned against the cold masonry, you feel a strange sense of completion. You have held the line, you have brought the bread to the hungry, you have kept the flame alive for one more day. The naval tradition of the Romans, born in the salt of the Mediterranean and tempered in the fires of 1,000 battles, finds its final resting place in the steady beat of your heart. The water laps at the base of the wall below you, a soft, repetitive sound that lulls your senses. You imagine the city not as a fortress under siege, but as a great ship itself, sailing through the currents of history toward an unknown shore. You are its pilot, its guardian, and though the hull may be leaking and the masts may be broken, you will stay at your post until the very end. The weight of your responsibilities begins to dissolve into the darkness, leaving only the sensation of the wind on your face and the distant, comforting rhythm of the tide. You are tired, so very tired, and the stone beneath you feels as soft as a feather bed as you surrender to the quiet. The stars above Constantinople are the same stars that guided the first triremes and the grandest dromons of the Golden Age. They do not change, even as empires crumble and the fires on the water go out. You let your breathing slow, matching the gentle rise and fall of the sea you have served so faithfully. There is no more fire to pour, no more oars to pull, only the long, deep reach of the night, and the peace that comes from knowing you have finished your watch. The city sleeps, and you sleep with it, a part of its stone, its water, and its eternal flickering memory. The scent of brine and old sun-bleached cedar lingers in your nostrils, a phantom sensation that follows you into the quiet depths of history. You are no longer standing upon the deck, feeling the vibration of the siphons or the heat of the hidden furnace, yet the sea remains. It is a vast, liquid vault, holding on to the secrets you once guarded with your life. As the centuries press down like the weight of the deep water, the city above changes its name, its faith, and its face, but beneath the silt of the Yenikapi harbor, the bones of your world are waiting. You can almost feel the cold mud pressing against the ribs of the Dromons, preserving the wood you once scrubbed, the very planks that carried you through the spray of the Marmara. Modern hands, centuries removed from your own, eventually reach down into that darkness. They brush away the earth to find the remains of the navy you served, uncovering the slender, predatory shapes of the galleys that once made the world tremble. They find the stowage bins, the coils of rope turned to black fibre, and the stones used for ballast, each one a tangible echo of a day you spent under the blistering sun. You imagine them looking at the charred wood, wondering about the fire that once danced upon the waves, trying to reconstruct the geometry of the siphons that you handled with such practiced, fearful ease. They search for the chemical ghost of the Greek fire, peering into the pores of the ceramic jars, yet the substance itself remains elusive, a shadow that refuses to be stepped upon. The secret of the fire was not just a recipe, but a ritual, a symphony of temperatures and pressures that died with the last of the masters. You remember the way the oil felt on your skin, thick, pungent, and terrifyingly persistent, and how the formulas were whispered from ear to ear, never allowed to touch the permanence of parchment. As the empire's borders began to pull inward, like a garment being folded away, the knowledge began to fray at the edges. The specialized craftsmen who knew the exact proportions of the resins, the alchemists who understood the volatile heart of the naphtha, and the engineers who could cast the bronze pumps, they faded into the grey mists of time. By the time the walls finally fell to the thunder of gunpowder, the liquid flame was already a legend, a story told by old men to children who could scarcely believe that water once burned. You watch from the stillness of the deep as the technology you pioneered ripples outward, touching the shores of distant lands. The way you balanced speed with the weight of the engines, the way you organized the rowers into a disciplined machine, and the very concept of naval artillery, these things did not vanish. They became the foundation for the great fleets of the Mediterranean that would follow. The Venetians and the Genoese, who once traded in your harbours and studied your manoeuvres with envious eyes, took the lessons of the Byzantine navy and wove them into their own designs. The spirit of the Dromon lived on in the great galleasses of later eras, and the tactical use of flame, though changed in form, haunted the dreams of sailors for generations. You see the influence of your struggle in every ship that prioritizes the protection of its home waters, in every captain who understands that a smaller, faster vessel can topple a giant if it carries the right spark. The silence of the sea is a heavy cloak, but it is not an empty one. It is filled with the resonance of every stroke you took and every shout that echoed across the Golden Horn. The Mediterranean is a graveyard of empires, yes, but it is also a library, where the salt preserves the memory of your labor. You find a strange comfort in the fact that the world could not hold on to your fire, that some things are too potent, too dangerous to be carried forever. It belongs to your time, to your city, and to the specific, desperate bravery required to stand at the edge of a wooden world and command the elements. As you drift further into the cool embrace of the past, the ache in your shoulders from the heavy oars finally begins to dissolve. The memory of the smoke in your lungs is replaced by the clean, neutral scent of the abyss. You are part of the sediment now, part of the limestone and the ancient shells, a witness to the slow geological pace of the earth. The secret of the fire is safe with you, tucked away in the quiet folds of a mind that has seen the horizon burn and the stars reflected in a calm, dark harbour. There is no need for the siphon now, no need for the watchman's cry. The Mediterranean holds its breath, and you, the guardian of the flame, are finally allowed to let the embers go cold. The influence of your life is not measured in the stones that remain, but in the way the world learned to move across the water. Every sailor who looks at the dark sea and feels a flicker of ancient respect for its power is carrying a piece of your legacy. The Byzantine navy was not just a collection of ships, it was a barrier of will, a shield made of wood and fire that held the center of the world together for 1,000 years, and as the currents pull you deeper into the velvet dark, you realize that even if the formula is lost, the courage that fueled it is indestructible. It remains in the silt, in the wrecks, and in the very rhythm of the tides that continue to wash against the walls of the city you once called home. You are the echo in the deep, the whisper of a flame that refused to be extinguished until its work was done. The history books may struggle to name the ingredients of your fire, but they cannot deny the warmth it provided to a civilization that might have otherwise vanished into the night. You lean back into the softness of the ages, feeling the slow pulse of the ocean as it breathes for you. The watch is over. The fire is gone, but the sea remembers your name, even if the world has forgotten how to speak it. You close your eyes, and the last thing you see is not the terrifying glow of the naphtha, but the gentle, rhythmic shimmer of the moon on the water, a light that requires no fuel and a peace that requires no defense. The stone beneath your hand is no longer the cold, salted block of the Golden Horn, but a smoother, warmer remnant of the same lineage, worn down by the passage of 1,600 years. As you drift between the memory of the fire and the stillness of the present, the skyline of modern Istanbul begins to shimmer through the mist of your dreams, a sprawling tapestry of light that rises where the torches once flickered. The towering minarets of the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque reach toward the same stars you watched from the deck of your Dromon, their silhouettes standing as silent sentinels over a city that has changed its name but never its soul. The massive sea walls, those jagged teeth of limestone and brick that you spent your life defending, still cling to the shoreline, broken in places by the march of time and the widening of roads, yet they remain the skeleton of the world you knew. You can feel the weight of those stones in your very bones, a heavy, comforting presence that suggests that even when empires crumble and the language of the court is forgotten, the foundations we lay with our own hands endure. The roar of the Greek fire has been replaced by the distant, rhythmic hum of the city, the faint pulse of engines, the muffled echoes of life on the shore. But if you listen closely, the deepest sound is still the water hitting the rocks. It is the same salt spray that crusted on your eyelashes, the same dark depths that swallowed the invaders, and the same current that carried your ship home when the battle was won. You are one of the thousands whose names were never carved into the marble of the hippodrome, a sailor of the flame who lived in the shadow of the great palace and died without a monument. And yet, the peace of the modern night is your true legacy, a quiet gift passed down through the centuries to those who sleep safely behind the walls you guarded. You were the gatekeeper of Europe, the anonymous shield that held the line when the world was on fire, and now the duty has finally been lifted from your shoulders. There is no more oil to pump, no more bronze siphons to polish, and no more horizon to scan for the sails of a hostile fleet. The wool of your tunic feels soft against your skin, stripped of the brine and the soot, and the ache in your lower back from leaning against the mast begins to dissolve into the mattress of time. You are part of the city's breath now, a ghost in the spray, a memory held by the Marmara. The waves continue their slow, deliberate work against the ancient masonry, a sound like a long, drawn-out sigh that echoes the rhythm of your own breathing. Each swell of the tide is a reminder that the sea does not hurry. It has watched the rise and fall of the Theodosian walls, the coming of the Crusaders, and the transformation of the skyline, yet it remains unchanged, a vast and liquid mirror for the moon. As you sink deeper into the quiet, the modern lights of the city begin to dim, fading into a soft amber glow that resembles the embers of a dying hearth. The tall buildings and the bridges of steel retreat into the fog, leaving only the primary elements of your existence, the stone, the wind, and the water. You find yourself back on the ramparts for one last moment, not as a soldier on high alert, but as a witness to the enduring beauty of the night. The air smells of old cedar and wet earth, a scent that bridges the gap between the centuries, carrying the essence of every soul who ever looked out from these shores and wondered at the vastness of the world. As the years passed into decades, and the decades into an eternity of quiet, the story of the fire ships became a legend, a whispered tale of dragons made of wood and bronze that breathed a flame no water could extinguish. But for you, it was never a legend. It was the sting of smoke in your eyes, the heat of the furnace on a midsummer night, and the calloused grip of your hands on the oars. It was the simple, profound reality of protecting your home. And now, that reality has found its rest. The city sleeps, cradled by the history you helped to write with every drop of sweat and every hour of the watch. The walls are still there, standing tall in the darkness, guarding the memories of the brave and the tired alike. You can let go of the tiller now. You can let the fire go out. The night is vast, and the water is calm, and the city is safe in the hands of the ages. The rhythmic sound of the waves is the only thing left, a steady, hypnotic pulse that guides you further away from the shore of the living and into the deep, dark blue of a dreamless sleep. The sea remembers, the stone remains, and you are finally, truly, at peace. The watch is over. The city is still Sleep now, as the waves return to the quiet of the night.